Well, welcome everybody. May 25th, which is Memorial Day weekend, John Kaplan, who has a garden up in the Oakland Hills, or it might be Piedmont. I'm not sure exactly what you would call as part of town, but beautiful garden. It's on I guess it's on an east side slope down to a creek. And then he has just a lot of really interesting, almost woodland type plants. And then he's having a big rock garden with the help of Kiamara and Walker Young, isn't it? From Ruth Bancroft Garden.
Yeah.
It's helping him with a rock garden. He's very hands-on in his garden. So, but that should be a lovely day as well. And then the next day, Kip, who was our speaker last month, is doing a Callus cordis hunting trip. And we'll be sending out an email on that and taking names. There's only can be 4 to 5 cars. Judy, Tosh, and I, and Claire Butler went to stake it out yesterday. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area out there. And of course, there was no calocortis at the time, but other things were blooming. And it should be a fun trip. That's what we have coming up. Now there's the field trip. If you want to host a coffee in the garden and invite everybody over to see your creation, we really encourage that. And everybody loves to see everybody else's garden. So let me know if you want to share. Next month, we're going to have Dr. David Pepper, and that's going to be in person. And we usually start off with a walk on the Botanic Garden. And I don't know if people were with us at the November meeting last year. We went walk through the botanical gardens, which we always do if we have a live meeting. And he kind of attached himself, and he was just a great guy and came back for pizza and our demonstrations and our plant exchange. And a doctor, and he is quite knowledgeable in ethnobotany and the uses of plants with Indigenous people as well as modern day folks. And so we'll be meeting at the County Fair building at Golden Gate Park, and that is on the corner of 9th and Lincoln. And then there's parking behind the building. So if you continue west on Lincoln, there's a small little driveway that you kind of have to keep an eye out that you can park in, and then we'll have either dinner or you go across the street to any restaurants across the way, and then we'll have a live plant forum on the, at 7, and then Pepper's special presentation at 7:30. So things to look forward to.
And I volunteered for this, and I do know something, but I'm moderately intimidated by the brilliance in the room. So I hope everybody comes with, and I'll be happy to spirit a conversation around, man and plants and psyche and medicine.
Well, everybody knows more about some things and not as much as on other things, so it'll be all welcome. We look forward to your talk for sure.
Thank you. Looking forward to it as well.
And then if anybody wants to host a garden, we'd love to go see what you guys have been up to in person. So just contact me and we'll get it arranged. So anyway, did I see Heather?
Yes, you did.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll let you go ahead and introduce Jennifer. I saw Jennifer on there as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ellen. So tonight's speaker, I'm personally very excited for. It's Jennifer Jewell, and she's the creator, writer, and host of Cultivating Place. And if none of you know about this podcast, I would highly recommend to put it on your list. It's just simply fantastic. It's one of my personal favorites. It's a podcast for, with, and about gardeners and nature lovers of all manner and like all over the globe, all walks of life. It's always very exploratory and spiritual and interesting. Gosh, I just can't have enough good adjectives for it. Cultivating Place is the name of it. It's won a bunch of awards, the podcast and Jennifer has. And Jennifer's also written multiple books. I think this is 3. We're on number 3 now. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she's going to talk a little bit more about that in her presentation tonight. Yeah, she's just a fabulous interviewer and speaker. Truly honored that she's here with us tonight. So I'm going to hand it over to her. There's so much more to tell about you, but I'm going to let you put it in your own eloquent words. So Jennifer Jewell, take it over.
Well, thank you so much. And I did not pay Heather extra to give such a lovely introduction. And if David Pepper is intimidated by the brilliance in the room, I don't even know where that puts me in this spectrum, but I am really, really pleased to be here tonight, right? I think everyone can see that. Definitely see a couple of friends in the audience, which is nice. Hi, Josh. Hi, Bart. Maybe there are others as well, but thank you so much, California Horticultural Society, for inviting me to speak this evening. I am super honored to be part of your ranks this evening. Given how long you all have been growing and tending through gatherings of gardeners like this, that happen all the time, in person, online, and helping to grow our world better. I always sort of ask myself, what is the plural for a group of gardeners? And my favorite result so far is a generosity of gardeners, because that just seems like who we are as people. So given your long history of CalHort dating back to that hard winter of 1932-33, I am especially proud to take part. But one of the things I have found so interesting in the work that I am doing is that fossil evidence demonstrates that we as humans, man and woman, and otherwise, demonstrates that we as a species have been selecting and planting and altering and adapting seed for more than 14,000 years at least, based on this recent pollen study. But I'm guessing the cultural seed keepers among us would bear witness that this relationship of responsibility and reciprocity, of synergy and symbiosis, stretches back in all likelihood for hundreds of thousands of years. And therefore, I just remind myself, especially, that we all stand and garden in a very long line of humans endeavoring likewise. And this reminds me that not only are we never alone in these endeavors and our joy and perhaps obsession with them, but we always have more to learn. And that to me is both daunting, but also very exciting. And so today, I want to share a little bit more about my own exploration into the importance of seed, which is the topic of my third book, What We Sow. And I do this not by way of teaching you all, who are exceptional plants people by and large, and very dedicated home gardeners and researchers and sharers. So I am not necessarily planning to teach you anything you don't already know, but hopefully I am celebrating us as gardeners, you as gardeners, and I am centering you and reminding you of the critical importance, as well as the incredible beauty and potential of what you do as individuals doing your garden and plant work, and joy, pleasure, play, but also what you collectively do as the California Horticultural Society, as gardeners and lifelong learners, of what you sow, intending your gardens, your plants, your places, and one another. As Heather mentioned, and some of you may know, I'm the founder and host of Cultivating Place, a nationally syndicated public radio program and podcast, which since 2016 has held this mission of attempting to elevate and expand the way we as a mainstream culture, so not necessarily California horticulture, who's already got very elevated language around what it means to be a gardener, but we as a collective culture, the way we think and talk about gardening, because I believe so wholeheartedly that gardens and gardeners are these powerful intersectional agents and spaces for positive change, that at our best, we as gardeners and land and plant stewards and partners, including all of you as the gardeners you are, we grow our worlds better at our best. We grow our worlds better environmentally, socially, economically, and spiritually. I produce Cultivating Place from the unceded traditional and present homelands of the Mechoopda Maidu of the Chico Rancheria, whose voices I've featured on Cultivating Place and whose land stewardship I tithe to. And I make that land acknowledgement again, not by way of hopefully an empty statement, but by way of contextualizing how long we as humans have been at this work. And I believe that that diversity of time and space and people and perspective, that biodiversity in the garden and in the truth of who we as, as gardeners have always been, like this is key. The human impulse to garden is shared by people and cultures across time and space, whether or not they use the word garden. And certainly, the ethnobotanical talk by David Pepper next time will emphasize and underline that as well. And the human impulse to garden is both a gift and, in my opinion, a responsibility, a truth which was so beautifully re-ingrained into our collective consciousness by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. But over the past 75 years or so, many of us as gardeners and our collective society have really abdicated the responsibility of this gift to a mainstream perception and culture that has often diminished this gift into a two-dimensional consumer activity focused on a commodified object. When in truth, most people I know tending their land and their plants, like all of you sharing what's blooming in your gardens right now, and therefore tending not just to your plants and your gardens, but to your communities of people, we express this human impulse to garden as a lifelong relationship, not an objectified consumer activity, no matter how many plants we might buy. And I believe that you all, intending your gardens ethically and ecologically as best you can, are such gardeners engaged in these lifelong relationships. And your many, many years as a group at this service in your place is both speaking to the gift and the responsibility. And here too, diversity is and always has been a seed for success that we shouldn't let mainstream perceptions change for us or alter the importance of that. So this is just a little mosaic of some of the topics that I might cover in the course of my program, which is absolutely not a how-to. And it is trying to not only capture how beautiful this activity is and the results of it are, but to get beyond that to why we do it and why it matters. So given what I do, I'm a lifelong gardener. I'm the daughter of a professional gardening mother and a wildlife biologist father. You can see their marriage in the title of my program. No one was more surprised than me when in March of 2020, my partner, John Whittlesey, a plantsman in his own right, John and I went to order seeds. You all remember March of 2020, perhaps, and you will remember that it was a very odd time to be ordering seeds. And we, like many of you, perhaps, were met with these messages of out of stock and back ordered and unavailable. And this triggered this very, very primal fear for me around survival, but also an understanding that as much as I thought that I knew about seeds, there was so much more that I didn't know about the state of seeds in our world. And that I was as plant blind, but also seed stupid as anyone. And that as a caring gardener, I really felt like this lack of attention and understanding was in a way irresponsible. And it was yet another abdication of us as gardeners to let somebody else take care of something big that we should have a better handle on. And this abdication actually made me complicit in ways of being that I don't want to be complicit in. And I know that I can do better than that, that we can all do better than that. And I think all of us here today are proof of that. We can pay attention to very complicated things. We can understand very complicated processes. And therefore, I think it's part of our job as gardeners to do just that, because so many of these plants that we love rely on being seeds that are well protected and well grown and well cared for. So in response to this fear and this recognition of my own lack of understanding, I began this several-year project reviewing what I did know about seeds and trying to really delve into and untangle and understand what I didn't know about the state of seeds. Who was growing them and where and how, and who was supplying them at all these levels, and who was legislating them and controlling them? Who was watching out for them, and why did this matter to everyone, from native seed growers and sowers to home gardeners like us, and to just plain humans everywhere? And I started by asking the very simple question, what exactly is seed? And the answer, first and foremost, as gardeners now and for the future, let us never forget this. Seed is nothing short of miraculous. It is to our physical and our plant world what a Messiah is to our religious worlds. It is the Alpha and the Omega. It is the beginning and the end and the beginning again. And when we stop to really think about the vast potential of just one seed, one acorn, for instance, becoming a 250-year-old oak tree who sustains hundreds of generations of thousands of species in the shelter of its canopy and the resources of its expansive root system, when we remember this and when we fully spend a moment to appreciate it, we feel the calculus of that mystery and that magnificence in our guts. We feel it at our knees. I do. And so when we work with seed, we have to remember that we are engaging with the very essence of life. As critical players in our clean air and clean water and food, even our medicine, seeds and the seed-bearing plants are at the heart of our very survival, intertwined with everything that allows us to survive and thrive. And as I write in the book, which is this like weird epiphany as an adult woman to come to, that if earth and air and fire and water are the first four primary elements, it has literally taken the fifth element, that is seed, to transform this planet with those other four elements into life being possible and pleasurable for us as humans on this planet. They are offered out by the plants and stewarded and shared forward by the plants, by the animals, by the elements across these many millennia. And seeds and plants, and I love this picture to illustrate this point because I speak all over the country. I was in Michigan and Indiana and Missouri and Chicago and I don't know, one other place, New Mexico already this year. I can show this picture to anyone, and in a group of even minimally educated garden people, people recognize this as the buckeye and the milkweed seed. They recognize these because of these species being native, these genera being native across the US. And when you see something like this, you recognize it and it feels familiar. It feels like home. It feels like childhood. It feels familiar. And that familiarity speaks to the common inheritance that plants and seeds are in our world, not just for us as gardeners, but for us as humans. And this common, but also magnificent, again, I will use that word over and over again, this common inheritance is a literacy we all share, even if we don't know all the fancy words that go with it. And that common inheritance of both gift and responsibility is something that I found as a baseline for some of my research. So after those two baselines, mystery and magnificence and common inheritance, I had to remind myself of some pretty basic information. I had to remind myself of the history of seed-bearing plants generally. And I'm not going to linger here too long because there are plenty of you in this audience who know far more about seed biology than I do. But I would point out in this information that in my research, there was a staggering number of high school graduates in the US noted as not being able to identify even where seed is produced on some of our most common plants. And so I would use this as a cautionary tale to those of us who know a great deal and those of us who are happy to share it, and even those of us who know a moderate amount, that we, in our scientific and ecological rigor or passion, we cannot leave the larger part of us as humans behind, and we cannot leave them out through conferences and get-togethers like this one, online talks, groups, societies like this one. It is really important that through policy and communication and outreach, we are like grandparents to grandchildren everywhere, and we bring along everyone we possibly can. I would highlight too that these plant lives that have seeds, these seed-bearing plants, have been co-adapting and evolving on this planet for 365 million years in some form. These more than 300,000 species, who comprise 80% of all plant life on the planet, they know things we don't know. They have so much to teach us. And perhaps one of the greatest lessons here is simply humility in the face of the seeds and the seed-bearing plants, but also humility with one another. We should always be interrogating ourselves about what we know, how we think we know it, and how best and most respectfully to leverage that now and for the future. To remind ourselves that pollination ecology, which helps create the seed, which is critical to creating the seed, is about collaboration and coordination and harnessing the power of both of those with the elements and with our communities of wildlife. That seed is the fertilized ovule of the seed-bearing plant, carrying everything that it needs to grow and all of its genetic, even epigenetic information in one tiny mobile packet that is a formula that has, when harnessed to the elements and again to wildlife, has resulted in the greatest success story of life on Earth. The seeds and the dispersal mechanisms of the seed-bearing plants with their dizzying array of architecture, which just never fail to slay me. The engineering and the artistry, these now characterize life on our planet. This is one of my favorite pictures that I have been able to gather of a seed dispersing its, a seed pod dispersing its seeds. And this is the common violet. And this is a lovely demonstration of how seeds are so smart and they have evolved to have such good backup mechanisms. So while most seeds have a primary seed dispersal mechanism, they all almost always have a second or third dispersal mechanism. So in this slide, you can see, can you see my cursor? You can see the little fleshy elaiosome here that's on that violet seed. And when it is fresh, it is juicy and plump and full of proteins that ants are attracted to. And they will go and open the seed pod and they will carry away their little seed treats and they will eat the elaiosome, which is what they want, and they will leave the seed. And they have thereby done the work the seed wanted them to do by moving it away from the mother plant and competition and allowing it to germinate elsewhere. But if the ants don't find that seed and they don't get the job done, the seed pod has a second dispersal mechanism, which is explosion, and it dries and dehisces along the edges, and then the pod pops open and the seed disperse through that propulsion. And I think about things like that with each seed, and I am incredibly just amazed at the ingenuity and the architecture. And I also want to go back and emphasize this relationship between seeds and animals in both pollination and in dispersal. In this common squirrel's dinner of pine nuts on a log in our back garden, we remembered that seed are actually interdependent with the lives of all animals on the planet as well. us included in that word animal. Seed needs us and we need them. And we forget half of that equation at our own peril and the peril of many other lives that are here with us on this planet. Seeds hold and embody the mysteries and lessons of both dormancy and germination, which could equate to the lessons of rest and patience and close, careful listening and persistence. And in some cases, these lessons are very carefully held by the seeds. And scientists such as Dr. Christina Walters and Stephanie Green at the USDA in Fort Collins, among many other seed scientists at work out there, are continuing every day, every year to try and better understand these secrets and how they work. For instance, it's really only just recently that seed scientists have begun to understand the role that not only fire, but also smoke plays in germination, and not just smoke in the air during fire season, but smoke in the water. And I'm sure many of you have heard that seed ecologists and seed growers around the world, but especially in fire adapted regions, are now using that smoky water as an application to help their fire adapted seeds germinate more effectively and more abundantly. And one of the takeaways in this, again, is how much we have left to learn and how important it is we, no matter where we are in this hierarchy of garden and plant and seed knowledge, stay open to what we still don't know. You know, and seeds are one of these just mysteries in life. And I can tell you all of that biology, and I can try and understand all of that morphology and phenology of the different seeds and the different species and the different places that I might happen to be. But even understanding all of those things, we don't really have a complete story of what seed means in our world. And so we have to ask ourselves again, what is seed in its fullness in this world? And yes, it is the extravaganza of one good wet winter after several years of drought, transforming the brown California hillsides into a super bloom of annual and perennial wildflower diversity. This was taken at the Carrizo Plain 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe. And yes, seed and all of its magnificence and mystery is the basis of ecosystems and ecosystem health and well-being for our forests, our wetlands, our mountains, our foothills, our valleys, and our coasts. So the next question for me became, what then is the story of seed as the result of seed in our human hands? It is the basis of much of our favorite foods, our flowers, our herbs, our medicines. It is utility, it is art, it is the houses we live in. It is the clothes we wear, it is the perfume we offer with prayers to the universe. And in one way, this results in the greatest love story, not just success story, but love story of all time, a story of humans and plants and seeds mutually flourishing, collaborating, being interdependent, and being adaptive and evolving, all leading to what I would call seed abundance in our culture, in our food, in our science, and in our innovation. But in another way, running parallel to this love story is another story, and it is possibly the longest standing incidence of domestic violence and gaslighting of all time, all leading to something I can only call seed anguish. It is characterized by extraction and abuse and diminishment and degradation. And this has led since the mid-1900s to too many, too frequently overreaching seed patents, to controversial genetic engineering and modification rammed through an approval process that is perhaps not serving the best interests of most of us. And all of these are prevalent to such a degree in our commodity crops, notably the exact staple and sacred food crops of cultures throughout history. Think corn, think wheat, think soy. It has led to seed consolidation, to seed petrochemical applications for convenience, for profit, for control of people and land. The EPA and the USDA currently acknowledge that everyone in the United States is exposed to pesticides on such a regular basis that at this point, if any one of us, me and any of you listening here tonight, were to test our blood or our urine right now, we would find traces of all of these pesticides, or many of them, there. And this is the inevitable outcome of using over 1 billion pounds of pesticides every year in the US. That is nearly a quarter of total pesticide use worldwide. This use of chemicals is not going down, it is only going up. And there are dozens of biocides, to use Rachel Carson's term, approved for agricultural applications in the US today that are banned or in the process of complete phase out in the European Union, Brazil, even China. The Xerces Society, things have gotten so terrible that the Xerces Society, in their fight to advocate for all invertebrates, but especially a poster child, the monarch butterfly, they have been nearly unable to find milkweed sold by a commercial nursery that does not have traces of neonicotinoids. This is what anguish does. It separates, it isolates, it degrades, it diminishes, and it destroys. The love story here is nothing short of magic, but the anguish is nothing less than criminal and tragic. And all of us here today have a say in how and where these stories go or don't go from here. Both the love story and the tragedy follow the long history of humans exchanging seed with one another, as you all will do when you get together in person, as we all just naturally do as gardeners. And this has led over many thousands of years to the modern seed industry and seed commerce law. This stretches back to the earliest seed and spice trade, like thousands of years before the Common Era. It has moved along to the ancestors of our seed catalogs of today, which are related to the herbals of the Middle Ages and the florilegium of the wealthy and educated in the 1500s. During the ages of exploration and colonization and improved mass printing, this brought about the earliest plant and seed catalogs of the 1600s, which has led the way to our many seed catalogs online and in hard copy that are available now. In the love story side of our storyline, this has given way to this incredible diversity of independent seed growers that we all love and enjoy diving into and finding out about and sharing with each other. These independent seed growers, sellers, and breeders in our world today. This is just one very curated and tidied up picture of John and my crazy seed drawer at home. And in just this, you can see the colorful slice of diversity that US organic and independent food and flower seed growers offer, and how they are preserving open pollinated and heirloom and unpatented varieties. These independent sellers, growers, and breeders, they are a very important but also precarious branch of seed security, what we think of when we think of the concept of seed security. And that security is held in some part in whether the greatest number of these independent pursuits continue or they fail. And we have a say in those stakes as well. In this time of the sixth mass extinction of unprecedented biodiversity loss, habitat loss, and the gardeners and humans, great desire to fight against this, this epic love story of seeds and humans has led as well to a great cohort of people who are conserving native plant seed. So not just human food seed, which was the basis of original collections and sharing, but native plant seed just simply for its restoration and habitat value. And I believe that it's important that we as gardeners and plant and nature lovers, we recognize that level of seed security as well. Not just what benefits us most directly, but that which benefits the greatest number of lives on the planet. And native seeds and native habitat is going to do that. It is also this seed security represented in the great diversity of home gardeners who support this branch. It is in the seed we tend that places can be supported and restored. And when you think about it that way, like we are hearing about biodiversity loss and habitat fragmentation over and over. It is the ongoing dirge of our time. And yet these kinds of gardens, this kind of work, this is biodiversity gained. This is water filtered and stored. This is carbon stored. This is habitat and habitat connectivity. This is economic circularity. This is climate resilience and cultural sanity. We're in something of a seed zeitgeist. In the last couple of months alone, John and I have noted headline articles related to the state of seed, making big headlines in the New York Times, in The Guardian, in The Economist. And at the National Native Seed Conference a few weeks back, or a few months back now for me, where I was the keynote speaker, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland and Director Stone Manning of the BLM introduced the meaningful native seed work of the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Land Management and their long in development national seed strategy, which is long needed and some might say very overdue. But the zeitgeist does seem to be here now. Wait, I went too fast. The zeitgeist does seem to be here now, and it's really going to be up to us, I think. The now over 100,000 households in the US who identify as gardeners. It's up to us to firmly root this idea of the importance of seed and plant and genetic diversity into our collective sense of identity and what we as a culture value most. 100,000 households, even a fraction of them, having these kinds of conversations, that starts to move a needle. Because I will tell you that on the seed anguish side of this story, we have the unbelievable consolidation of the seed industry in just the last 30 years. This is a graphic from the web, and it shows that in this last 30 years, petrochemical companies and pharmaceutical companies now control over 60% of the seed industry in our world. Stop a second. Sit with the weirdness and the yuckiness of that thought. Pharmaceutical and petrochemical companies controlling our ecosystem and food security. That is very unsettling. In both storylines, seed abundance and seed anguish, they also both run parallel to the history of seed banks. This is a picture of John's property following the campfire of November 2018. The property was burned. The house did not burn, thankfully. And we took as many pictures as we could to document what had happened. It, of course, destroyed the town of Paradise, which is just to the north and west of his property. And in some places, the earth is charred. And in those places, we were worried it was sterilized. But in others, of course, fire did what fire does, and it regenerated the land. Just 1 week post-fire, we got our first rain in 6 months, and the natural seed bank began to germinate. It was amazing. It was amazing. And it reminded us that the land itself is the first and most important seed bank. And if it's not damaged or otherwise degraded, it is also the most efficient and resilient seed bank. That germination right there in this picture, it had 2 important takeaways for me. One of those was that when we lose places and their ecosystem health, we lose important seed banks. The second takeaway lesson here is that nothing is binary. Nothing is all good or all bad, not fire and not seed. Because of course, when you look at this picture, you know that we are not only seeing the incredible diversity of native plants germinating in this region, we are also seeing the undaunted legacy of invasive plants, mostly introduced by colonizing settler, even gardening humans, most especially gardening humans like me. And the point here, again, is never lose sight of the fact that seed is powerful in both the positive and the potentially destructive. We need to engage with seed and the seed-bearing plants that we plant with the utmost respect, care, caution, and knowledge. In this time of colliding urgencies, I beg us all, I beg myself and you all to take our time and do the homework that we need to do of listening, of observing and learning from the land, from the plants co-evolved with the land, and from the people co-evolved with both, so that in our urgency to help, to do anything to make things better, we don't just make things worse. To a person, every single leader of a seed bank that I had the opportunity to interview for this book, including John Dickey, who's the director of the Millennium Seed Bank at Kew in the United Kingdom, to both Drs. Walter and Green at the USDA, they all emphasized the conservation of seed places, in situ conservation, as the first and most important line of defense for the future of the world we want. But the human story of human seed banking, ex situ conservation, is one of the most fascinating pieces of research that I followed for this book. It is a fascinating tale of human endeavor. The story of large institutional and governmental seed banks starts with Russia's Vavilov Research Institute of Plant Industry, which was formally founded in the 1920s, but whose work dates back to the 1890s. Soviet geneticist Nikolai Vavilov, who led this, he recognized the importance of collecting and preserving the most important crop seed genetics in order to safeguard the ability to feed people. And he was hoping to rid the world of famine through preserving not only that crop seed, but all of that crop seed's wild progenitors. This is the place, this seed bank here that you see the picture of, where during the 2-year siege of Leningrad in World War II, seed scientists barricaded themselves into the seed bank in order to protect the seed inside from not only opposing forces, but also starving citizens. These scientists went on to starve to death with food all around them in the form of seed in order to preserve food security for the future. I think that gives you some of the gravity of what this kind of work is grappling with and always has been. Prior to large governmental seed banks, land-based communities across time and space have always saved, preserved, strategically shared, and planted their seed. The Native Seed Search Center in Tucson, Arizona, which was co-founded by the ethnobotanist Gary Nabhan in the 1980s, strives to preserve the indigenous seed crop and diversity of that seed, of the many, again, diverse native peoples to the Southwest. in the Southwest. As time has gone on, seed banks, which had originally focused, these large governmental seed banks, on food crop security, as time has gone on and the biodiversity loss and habitat loss have become this dirge of our times, seed banks have evolved to include those specifically focused on native seed biodiversity in order to protect and preserve the integrity of distinct places for restoration now and in the future. But sadly, we are in the future of so much needing restoration and being lost at the same time. One example of these seed banks is the Dixon National Tallgrass Prairie Seed Bank at the Chicago Botanic Garden, which is preserving the biodiversity of the endangered tallgrass prairie ecosystem that was originally present from Lower Canada all the way down to Texas. And this seed bank is one of the 260 seed banking projects fostered by the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew's Millennium Seed Bank Initiative, which only got started in the year 2000. So when you think of what we have accomplished in the way of diversifying seed banking and seed banking technology, like we can do quite a lot in a short amount of time if we put our minds and our hearts and our values behind that. And these two examples, the native seed search and the tallgrass prairie seed bank, highlight again that in order to preserve even one culturally or economically important seed, we must preserve the wild biodiversity that led to that seed as we now know it. We need to preserve the wild and the cultivated. We cannot always silo food security here, garden beauty here, and wild biodiversity over there. They are all intimately related, even though they don't often get talked about all together. So this is just a quick image of the kind of geographic range of large seed banks across the world. And currently there are more than 1,500 large and mid-sized seed banks being active. But of course, the charismatic mega seed bank of our time is the Global Seed Vault in Svalbard, Norway, an archipelago north of the Arctic Circle. And this seed bank is a super cool coming to fruition and a remarkable amount of, again, collaboration and cooperation between governments and institutions and seed, which is not a sentence you get to say very often, that these three big groups have all cooperated and collaborated well together. But the Seed Vault does seem to be an example of that. And the goal of this vault is to safeguard seed against climate change and socio-political and economic ups and downs that have always plagued seed banks. If seed banks in their places, those 1,500 that I showed you that slide of, are the backup copy of natural and human cultivated biodiversity, this global seed vault is kind of the pinnacle of elegant redundancy because it is the backup copy of the backup copies. It was opened in 2008 and it does not collect any seed of its own. It does not preserve any one region or subset of biodiversity. It simply stores backup copies of all the other seed banks and governmental collections around the world. It was opened in 2008, and the need for this level of seed security became almost immediately apparent when, between 2012 and 2014, the Syrian war brought about the attack of the let me say that again. In Aleppo, they had the seed bank of dryland crop diversity known as ICARDA. That's an acronym, ICARDA. And that was founded in the 1970s in Aleppo, Syria. During the Syrian war, it came under attack and it had to be abandoned pretty quickly, and it did not allow the scientists time to take seed with them. Thankfully, the historic collection, which was under the care of Ali Shehada and his team, it had been backed up at the Global Seed Vault. And so by withdrawing their deposit, they were able to reconstitute the collection and continue their research and their preservation mandates at 2 different sites, one in Lebanon and the other in Morocco. Another one of my favorite favorite threads of inquiry into the fabric of the storyline that leads us to seed abundance and that love story is the establishment of common seed exchange and common seed sharing. You know, it starts with something like Seed Savers Exchange, which is a phenomenal beginning and nexus for this kind of exchange, but you kind of have to be a gardener to know about it, and you kind of have to be a gardener to access the online catalog and all of that. One of the great sort of sisters, let's say, to the Seed Savers Exchange is the development of seed libraries across the US and now across the world. These are based too on the idea of communal seed saving and swapping and sharing going back centuries, but they're also based on the democratic ideals of a public library in which knowledge is stored and made accessible for everyone, free of charge in the commons and as a birthright. And between these two, they are both ways that we see people trying to reintroduce the fact and presence of seed, native seed, food seed, flowering seed, back into the everyday lives of people who have been perhaps divorced from these relationships for too long. The first fully realized seed library in the form that we think of them now was founded by Kay Green in Gardner, New York. Perfect name for the town to host that first seed library in 2004. Kay and his partner Doug went on to found Hudson Valley Seed, which I'm sure many of you have purchased from and know about. So the story of seed libraries is just one of the stories of people reclaiming their relationship with and responsibility to seed, their access to seed, and seeds continuing to be a part of our human commons. As of June 2020, there were nearly 1,400 self-identified seed libraries in the US, and many more sprouted up during the pandemic, but I haven't seen a cumulative number yet. As Jeff Quattrone, who's founder of the New Jersey Seed Library Network and a man dedicated to collecting and preserving historic tomato breed diversity in New Jersey, like such a funny combination. As he pointed out to me in our interview, the larger the mainstream, the larger these corporate and for-profit endeavors controlling seed are, the more room for the undercurrent. So I love this graphic of his, which is all about power to the seed people, power to us and to you. I collected a lot of research on seed people on the ground through my several books. In The Earth in Her Hands and in Under Western Skies, I profile both seed keepers and gardens that are based on just seed grown or heavily based on seed grown plants. And these really came together with podcast interviews to be intertwined in the book in What We Sow. And this is just a collection of some of those people I cover between those 4 different sections. And, you know, the importance here is that intertwined all of them together in What We Sow really illuminate the many aspects and pathways contributing to seed abundance and biodiversity support and cultural and climate resilience. And these pathways are kind of marked here, but they include the availability and support of certified organic seeds, the importance of maintaining good hybrid seed as well as open pollinated and heirloom varieties, the importance of taking care of land and farmers, as well as the preservation of ancient crop diversity, the importance of genetically diverse, sexually reproduced seed-grown native plants in the landscape industry, so we do not end up with an entire continent of clones. And they're, of course, like, we're gardeners. We love division. We love to share a cutting and grow it on. But if that's all there is in the native seed industry or native plant industry are the clones, we're backing ourselves in a corner we don't want to be in. Also, the importance of preserving and celebrating seeds of cultural significance in this age of so many diasporas, and making these seedways visible and valued in our world. And of course, rematriating Indigenous seed and in supporting Indigenous leaders. And finally, the role of the home gardener in sowing seed, saving seed, and sharing seed. All of this is woven into the book. There are so many pathways of loving seed-based solutions growing and continuing to germinate in opposition to the storyline that has led to and continues a narrative of seed apartheid, seed anguish. These are just some of the faces that populate these seed ways. And these are some of my greatest sources of optimism in the midst of all of this sometimes very depressing research, is the sheer number of seed people at work behind each of these seed ways. You know, when you consider the worldview of land-based people who hold seed the world over as living beings and relatives and ancestors, and the tiniest forms of life embodying all of the biodiverse genetic, cultural, and environmental knowledge, these land-based people consider seeds as blessings and lessons of the past handed down to us in the present to steward forward for the future. If you compare that worldview to one that is held by the massive agro-industrial, petrochemical, profit-driven sector who cover our seeds in toxic chemicals and sell them to the highest bidder, which is sort of the equivalent of covering your grandmother in chemicals and lighting her on fire, you cannot get worldviews that are more diametrically opposed. Now, I heard the chuckle there. I know I sound so crazy, over the top, dramatic, but think about it. These two worldviews are so diametrically opposed. And right now is an inflection point in our world in which we as gardeners get to choose, and I hope we must choose, a durable, more moral ecology for the future. Perhaps one of my most poignant seed keeper interviews on the Cultivating Place program was in 2021 with seed keeper Vivian Sansour. She's the founder of the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library, and she did and does continue to do identify, find, collect, preserve, share as much of the diversity of her homeland's cultural and crop seed as humanly possible. Now, in this exact moment in 2024, Vivian is not smiling and happy. She is, of course, heartbroken at the destruction going on and the damage happening to humans and land and plant diversity across this entire region. But so she's not smiling right now. But in her work on behalf of seed, I want you to note this smile on her face in 2021. It is a reminder that we don't do this work of loving plants and gardens and nature and ecosystems because of all the urgencies in front of us. We do this work because it is beautiful and joyful, and it is as close to the divine as we might ever get. And it is brought to us through these seed lives that we engage with. And knowing what we are growing for, as well as what we are growing against, is perhaps our best motivation. So certainly fight injustice, but don't forget to tap into the joy you find here, because that will be one of our greatest strengths as gardeners. I truly believe this. This quote remains a mantra for me in my work. These are trying times, but they are also opportune times, asking us how mediocre or brave we want to be. We have the choice, because I will tell you, mediocre or brave, we have mediocre down. We have mediocre and much worse down pat. We are losing species at an unprecedented rate. We are warming and drying and disrupting the climate of our planet at an unprecedented rate. We have mediocre down. How long are we going to tend or let the world tend to 40 million acres of overwatered, overgrown, non-native monoculture turf grass in this country? How long? We have mediocre down in habitat destruction, in large-scale agriculture and seed patents, continued consolidation and privatization of much of what should be held in the commons, and an arsenal of toxic chemicals available right now to you at all times, probably 24 hours a day, at the big box store, at the hardware store, even in my grocery store. We wonder where our pollinators have gone, and the answer is right in front of us. We have killed them with our overuse and underregulation of big industry profitable chemical cocktails. And here's the thing. We know we can do so much better. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave in a winter subdivision front garden in Michigan. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave as the California Horticultural Society has shown us this many, many years. And it is you on the ground doing the kind of gardening you're doing, this kind of backyard seed work, supporting this kind of policy work and education work and restoration work and joy work. It is this that literally sows the ground before us better. We know the importance of you and me multiplied by 40 or 100 million gardening households, putting our boots, our dollars, our votes, and our understanding, putting the power of our gardens large and small will make things better. All of you here today, plus me, we can grow our world in the direction we want it to grow. We are the people who can seed this change forward, away from anguish and toward abundance. And I thank you for your time. And I offer many blessings on your gardens and your gardening and your communities, continuing to steer this love story in constant service to beauty, biodiversity, and bravery. Thank you for your time. I know everybody likes a list, so this is my list. And I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sorry if I went a little long. I get very passionate, as you can tell.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. You certainly gave us a lot to think about and also a responsibility to think about. CalHort has a seed exchange every year, and you'll be a part of that as a member. You're an honorary member. So yeah, so that's great. Does anybody have questions for Jennifer?
I can't wait to watch the recording again.
Jennifer, hi, David Pepper. Well, if I was intimidated about the knowledge, now I'm intimidated by the quality of the composition of your talk. That was beautiful. It was really very, a beautiful arc, and I love the anguish to abundance. And you've done a wonderful introduction for my talk next month, which is, again, the intertwining of people, a little more about, you mentioned the perfumes and the foods and the plants, and I'm going to sort of go beyond that into some of the psychological and the pharmaco. One of the rails I have, because my real interest is around death and dying, and I often rail against the medical industrial complex, which is tied into the pharmaceutical industry.
And the petrochemical industry. Yes, it is.
Well, the petrochemical from World War I and II, that's exactly right. That's where we also got some of our chemotherapy agents and the derivatives. It is positives and negatives.
Yes.
And I love your prescription. I don't really have a specific question except to thank you. It was really a beautiful arc of a talk.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, and again, I think that what you just noted about the medical and pharmaceutical world is this reminder that, one, things are often hidden from us, and it's up to us to go and say, what am I not seeing here, and learn more about it. But also that nothing is binary, right? So I sound like I'm anti-GMO and I'm anti innovation and technology, and I'm none of those things, but I am anti them being the default without us thinking critically about what the consequences are one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because it's not all good or all bad, but it's up to us to ask ourselves. And I think we're busy, we're busy, and there are a lot of things to be worried about, but this is something I hope more people like us get a little more worried about and vocal about where we want our seed cared for and how we want it cared for.
Yeah, well, the plants, David Tivoli has been helping with the talk, and I threw out a figure that 50% of all pharmaceuticals have plant origin.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually realize it's 100% ultimately because the soil needed plants. But yeah, it's hugely, I think you're raising the issue that we need to be respectful and remember that our food didn't come from the grocery store. It came from people who planted it, and our pharmaceuticals came from the history, and that we need to hold that history and remember it.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah. Jennifer, this is Josh. Jennifer, you were always so inspiring and give me hope. I love listening to you. I'm curious. I think about how much policy goes on in our country that the average person and the average voter isn't really included in and often knows nothing about. And it's so difficult for me when I try to connect the dots for people to explain, this didn't happen in a vacuum. These were the steps that led up to this. Do you have any advice on how to talk with people in terms that they will be able, that won't seem overwhelming to them, about why these issues are important? Like how do you break it down for non-gardeners, for people who eat, and that's like the only thing they know about our food system is that they eat food, but they don't really know anything more than that. How do you explain why this is important in a way that they can grasp?
Well, this is why I turned in a 900-page manuscript, because it's not really that long. It's not that long, but it's a long book and it got edited a lot. Was me trying to explain some of these things to myself, Josh, right? And to try and connect. I mean, I always knew in the work that I was doing in the radio program before Cultivating Place and then in Cultivating Place, that we were isolating, like there were the rose people, and then there were the native people, and then there were the edible people, and they didn't often mix up. And so when I started doing this, and I think the reminder that all of those kinds of plants all come from the wild ecosystems at some point, that's one good connection for people to say, oh, that's right. Like we selected these plants from the wild. And so if we don't take care of the wild, we aren't in fact taking care of our food or our medicine in the future or in the present. And the second one that I think is key is kind of recognizing those poster children that we see thrown out at us all the time, whether it's, I sort of feel like right now the bumblebee is in the spotlight and the monarch has been in the spotlight for a long time. But if you can connect some of those, like that truth that if you were to test my blood or my urine right now, I would have neonicotinoids in them, and that we're trying to save the monarch, and yet we can't find a plant that isn't going to invite them in and then poison them. People really are moved by those statistics. And we're never going to get everybody to pay attention at the policy level, but I think if more of us as concerned and engaged gardeners, who is mostly the group of people I speak with, if more of us are paying attention to like what the CNPS is telling us about what the Farm Bill is doing to some of these issues, the more we familiarize ourselves with it, the better informed we'll be, and the better we'll be able to help move policy. We're not going to bring everybody along with us, but we might bring 5 of our friends. And if each of us bring along 5 of our friends, we're doing better than we were yesterday.
Yeah. That's helpful. And again, it's hopeful. because I've had trouble keeping hope when I see what's going on with the EPA and
Oh, yeah.
neonic coated seeds and how
Right.
they have done this carve out that makes absolutely no sense, so that
Yeah.
they're not regulated because they're not a pesticide. They're a pesticide coated seed. I mean, it's absurd. And
Yeah.
and luckily, groups like Audubon have stepped in, and they're now fighting this on behalf of native birds and what's going on with bird populations across North America.
Right.
But it just feels like an uphill battle constantly.
If any of you take on the process of reading the book, What We Sow, just there is that dense part in the middle that Josh just mentioned, which is like just depressing thread after depressing thread of how terrible things have gotten. Push through that and get to the other side so that you read about the seed keepers who are working against this. Because as you say, Josh, the Audubon hasn't just taken it on, they have started to win. So New York has become the first state, no, the second, I think Vermont was the first, to completely ban the use of neonicotinoids. And sadly, I mean, as Rachel Carson is, witness, it isn't about banning one chemical at a time, because we're never going to win that way. There's always going to be a proliferation of more chemicals right behind that one we just banned being introduced. We have to change the mindset of people that think it's okay that these are available everywhere all the time, at unconscionable levels. They should be regulated at the same, way better than firearms are regulated. And it's those of us, if enough of us as gardeners say, I am not going to use chemicals anymore, we start to shift the economic incentive for them to be produced at such a level. That's our biggest source of agency right from the get-go.
A lot to think about.
There's really happiness in the book too. Trust me.
Oh, there is.
Guys.
There is.
There's a
I
lot of
agree.
beauty and happiness.
Yes.
It's not just chemicals and dirges.
No, it's a wonderful read. So thank you. It is. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for bringing the cause to everybody's attention. It really is
Thank you.
needed.
Oh,
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and we really
Thank you.
appreciate your message.
Thank you, Jennifer.
thank you, everybody. And thank you for the nice messages. Really, really appreciate it. And can't wait to sit in on the next talks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you all. Things are
Big
happening.
thank you to Ellen.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Ellen.